Dear friends, as I sit here today sharing this story with you, I want you to know that what I'm about to tell you comes from a place of deep compassion and understanding. This is not just a story about betrayal or family drama, but about the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the power we have to protect ourselves and those we love when faced with unimaginable challenges. In the quiet moments before life changes forever, we often find ourselves unprepared for the storms that are about to reshape our world. These storms don't announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Instead, they arrive disguised as ordinary moments, normal conversations, familiar faces that we've learned to trust without question. Sometimes these storms come from the most unexpected places, from people we've invited into our hearts, from family members we never thought could betray us in ways that would shake the very foundation of our understanding about love, loyalty, and human nature. Today, I want to share with you a story that will touch your heart in ways you might not expect, challenge your understanding of trust and boundaries, and ultimately remind you of the incredible strength that lies within us when we need to protect the ones we love most. This is a story about a woman named Sarah, but it could be about any of us, because the lessons it contains are universal, and the emotions it explores are ones that we all carry within us. Before I begin, I want you to imagine yourself in Sarah's shoes. Picture a life that seems perfect from the outside, filled with loving relationships, family gatherings, and the kind of security that comes from being surrounded by people who care about you. Think about how it feels to trust completely, to open your heart without reservation, to believe in the goodness of the people closest to you. Hold on to that feeling as we journey together through this story, because understanding where Sarah started will help you appreciate the magnitude of what she faced and the courage it took for her to emerge stronger on the other side. This is a story about Sarah, a beautiful woman living in Denver, Colorado, who at 34 years old thought she understood the complex web of family relationships and the unspoken boundaries that keep them healthy and safe. Sarah was one of those rare people who radiated warmth wherever she went, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who always had a kind word for a stranger, and who could make anyone feel welcome in her presence. She had been married to her husband, Michael, for 10 wonderful years, and together they had built what seemed like the perfect life in a charming Victorian home in the suburbs where they raised their two children, 8-year-old Madison and 6-year-old James. Their life was the kind that others looked at with envy and admiration. Michael worked as a successful architect, designing homes that brought joy to other families, while Sarah had built a thriving career as a pediatric nurse, spending her days caring for children and supporting worried parents through some of their most difficult moments. They were the couple that friends turned to for advice, the ones who hosted dinner parties where everyone felt loved and accepted, the couple whose marriage seemed to embody everything that love could and should be. But their perfect life extended beyond their immediate family to include a close-knit network of relatives who had become an integral part of their daily existence. This network included Sarah's younger sister, Emma, a gentle soul who worked as an elementary school teacher and who had always looked up to Sarah as both sister and role model. Emma was 31 years old, with kind eyes and a soft-spoken manner that made children and adults alike feel comfortable in her presence. Emma had been married to David for 12 years now, and their relationship had always seemed to be one of those steady, comfortable partnerships that form the backbone of strong families. David was 35, a successful marketing executive with a charismatic personality that made him the life of every party. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and immediately make everyone feel like they were his closest friend, the kind of person who remembered details about your life and asked thoughtful questions that showed he genuinely cared about your well-being. Together, Emma and David had created what appeared to be a beautiful family with their two children, 10-year-old Sophie, a bright and creative girl who loved art and music, and 8-year-old Tyler, an energetic boy who was passionate about soccer and dinosaurs. Their home was always filled with the sounds of childhood laughter, art projects covering every surface, and the comfortable chaos that comes with raising active, happy children. Sarah and Michael lived their lives with open hearts, believing deeply in the goodness of people and the sanctity of family bonds. This wasn't naive optimism, but rather a choice they had made together to approach relationships with trust and generosity, to assume the best about people until given clear reason to do otherwise. It was a philosophy that had served them well throughout their lives, creating deep friendships and loving family connections that enriched their daily existence in countless ways. They spent countless weekends at family barbecues, where the smell of grilled burgers mixed with the laughter of children playing in the backyard. There were holiday gatherings where multiple generations would crowd around Emma and David's dining room table, sharing stories and creating memories that would be treasured for years to come. There were casual get-togethers on Sunday afternoons where the adults would sit on the back porch drinking coffee while the children rode bikes in the driveway and played elaborate games of hide-and-seek that often involved the grown-ups as reluctant participants. David had always been the fun uncle to Sarah and Michael's children, and they adored him with the uncomplicated love that children reserve for adults who treat them as genuine friends. He was the kind of man who would show up unexpectedly with surprise treats from the ice cream truck, who could turn a boring afternoon into an adventure by suggesting a spontaneous trip to the park or a game of backyard baseball. He told the most entertaining stories, often featuring elaborate characters and plot twists that would have Madison and James hanging on his every word, begging for just one more story before bedtime. The children saw David as this magical adult who never seemed to forget what it was like to be a child himself. He remembered what it felt like to believe in monsters under the bed and would spend serious time discussing the best strategies for keeping them away. He understood the devastating heartbreak of a broken toy and would arrive the next day with super glue and infinite patience to help fix whatever had been damaged. He knew that sometimes the most important thing an adult could do was get down on the floor and engage in the important work of playing, whether that meant building elaborate Lego cities or having tea parties with stuffed animals who each had their own distinct personalities and preferences. Looking back now, Sarah realizes that David's relationship with her children was one of the reasons she had trusted him so completely. Children, she believed, were excellent judges of character. They could sense insincerity and manipulation in ways that adults often missed, and her children had never shown any discomfort around David. In fact, quite the opposite was true. They lit up when he walked into a room and were always disappointed when family gatherings came to an end and he had to go home. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family dynamic, something dark and troubling was growing, something that would soon threaten to tear apart everything they held dear and forever change their understanding of trust, safety, and the people we allow into our most intimate spaces. You see, David had been harboring a secret that was eating away at him from the inside, a secret so destructive and inappropriate that when it finally came to light, it would forever change the way Sarah viewed trust, family relationships, and her own sense of safety in the world. This secret had been growing like a cancer in David's mind for years, feeding on stolen glances and misinterpreted kindnesses, creating an elaborate fantasy that bore no resemblance to reality but felt completely real to him. He had convinced himself that Sarah felt the same attraction that he felt, that their friendly conversations and familial affection were actually coded messages expressing mutual desire and romantic longing. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family dynamic, something dark was growing, something that would soon threaten to tear apart everything they held dear. You see, David had been harboring a secret that was eating away at him from the inside, a secret so destructive that when it finally came to light, it would forever change the way Sarah viewed trust, family, and her own sense of safety in the world. It all began on a Tuesday morning in March when Sarah received a text message that seemed completely innocent at first glance, the kind of message that arrives dozens of times each day in the busy life of a working mother and devoted family member. David had sent a simple message asking if she could meet him for lunch, saying there was something important he needed to discuss with her. The text came at 9:17 a.m., just as Sarah was finishing her morning routine of getting the children ready for school and preparing for her own day at the hospital. Sarah, being the caring and supportive sister-in-law she had always been, immediately felt a flutter of concern in her chest. Her mind immediately began cycling through possibilities, most of them centered around Emma and whether something was wrong in their marriage. Perhaps they were having financial difficulties, she thought, or maybe one of the children was struggling with something at school and David needed advice on how to handle the situation. Maybe Emma was dealing with health issues that she hadn't felt ready to share with the family yet, and David needed a woman's perspective on how to best support his wife through whatever she was facing. The more Sarah thought about it, the more convinced she became that this lunch meeting was about Emma. After all, Sarah and David had never had one-on-one conversations about serious topics before. Their relationship had always been friendly but surface level, the kind of comfortable familiarity that develops between in-laws who genuinely like each other but don't have deep personal bonds. They talked about work occasionally, shared funny stories about their children, and engaged in the kind of easy banter that makes family gatherings pleasant and relaxed. But they had never delved into personal or emotional territory. But as Sarah considered the request more carefully, she realized that this pattern actually made perfect sense if David was struggling with something in his marriage. Who better to talk to about Emma than Emma's sister, the person who knew her best and loved her unconditionally? Sarah had always prided herself on being the kind of sister that Emma could count on for anything, and by extension, she felt a responsibility to be there for David as well when he needed support in taking care of Emma. Sarah shared the invitation with Michael over their morning coffee, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage no matter how busy their schedules became. They sat at their small kitchen table, the same table where they had shared thousands of meals and conversations over the years, watching through the window as Madison and James played in the backyard before school. Their children's laughter providing the perfect soundtrack to their peaceful morning routine. Michael's reaction to the text message was similar to Sarah's initial response, mild curiosity mixed with concern for Emma, and a willingness to help family members work through whatever challenges they might be facing. Neither of them thought much of it beyond the natural worry that comes with caring about the people you love. After all, they were family, and supporting each other through difficult times was not just what families did, but what the Harper and Williams families had always done particularly well. Michael kissed his wife goodbye that morning, as he did every morning, a tender ritual that never felt routine despite its daily repetition. He told her to give his love to Emma and David, to let them know that he and Sarah were there for whatever they needed, completely unaware that both of their lives were about to be turned upside down in the most devastating and unimaginable way possible. The morning passed normally for Sarah. She went about her usual routine at the hospital, caring for young patients and supporting their families with the same compassion and competence that had made her beloved by colleagues and patients alike. She checked in on Tommy, a 7-year-old who was recovering from surgery, and spent extra time reading stories to Maria, a 5-year-old whose parents were unable to visit that day due to work obligations. These interactions, which normally filled Sarah with a sense of purpose and joy, felt slightly distracted today as her mind kept wandering to the upcoming lunch with David and what he might need to discuss. As the lunch hour approached, Sarah found herself feeling increasingly anxious, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. There was something in the tone of David's text message that had felt different, more serious than his usual light-hearted communications. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself that she was overthinking a simple family lunch, but the unease persisted like a low-grade fever that she couldn't quite shake. The cafe, it was the atmosphere. Sarah, she ordered. When Dave, he looked, his hand, it was they start, but his wrist, he kept his then, at first, David began to tell her about feelings he had been harboring for years, feelings that he said he could no longer keep buried inside his heart. He spoke about how he had fallen in love with her the very first time they met, how he had spent sleepless nights thinking about her, dreaming about what their life could be like together if circumstances were different. Sarah sat frozen in her chair as David poured out his heart to her, telling her about the fantasy life he had created in his mind where they were together, where he could give her everything he believed she deserved. He spoke about how he had watched her from afar, studying her movements, memorizing her smile, and convincing himself that she felt the same way about him that he felt about her. The words coming out of David's mouth felt surreal to Sarah, like she was trapped in some kind of nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. This man, her sister's husband, the father of her niece and nephew, was confessing his love to her in the middle of a crowded cafe, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. David continued his confession, telling Sarah about all the ways he believed Michael was failing as a husband, how he was certain he could love her better, treat her like the queen he believed she was meant to be. He painted elaborate pictures of the life they could have together, the places they could travel, the happiness they could share if only she would give him a chance. Sarah tried multiple times to interrupt him, to tell him how inappropriate his words were, how much damage he was causing to their family with every sentence he spoke. But David seemed determined to say everything he had rehearsed in his mind, as if this was his one chance to convince her that they belonged together. As David spoke, Sarah's mind raced with the implications of what she was hearing. Not only was he betraying her sister Emma in the most devastating way possible, but he was also putting Sarah in an impossible position. How could she ever look at her sister again knowing what her husband truly felt? How could she continue to attend family gatherings, pretending that everything was normal when David would be there, looking at her with those hungry, obsessive eyes? When David finally finished his declaration of love, Sarah found her voice and firmly told him that what he was suggesting was not only impossible, but deeply wrong. She reminded him that he was married to her sister, that they had children together, that he was destroying his family with these selfish fantasies. But David seemed impervious to her rejection, as if he had convinced himself that her protests were just obstacles to overcome rather than clear boundaries being set. Sarah ended the lunch abruptly, her hands shaking as she gathered her purse and coat. She told David in no uncertain terms that he needed to forget about these feelings, to focus on his marriage and his children, and to never speak to her about this again. But as she walked away from the cafe that day, she could feel his eyes following her, and she knew instinctively that this was far from over. The drive home felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. Her mind was reeling from what had just happened, and she struggled to process the magnitude of David's betrayal. How long had he been harboring these feelings? Had she somehow encouraged them without realizing it? What was she going to tell Michael, and more importantly, what was she going to tell her sister Emma? When Sarah walked through her front door that evening, Michael immediately knew something was wrong. The colour had drained from her face, and her usual warm smile was nowhere to be found. When he asked her about the lunch with David, Sarah burst into tears and told him everything that had happened. Michael's reaction was swift and protective, his anger burning hot as he realised the violation of trust that had just occurred. Together, Sarah and Michael grappled with the decision of whether to tell Emma immediately or to wait and see if David would come to his senses and confess his inappropriate behaviour himself. They decided to give him 48 hours to do the right thing, to come clean to his wife about what he had done, and to seek help for his obsessive behaviour. But David did not confess. Instead, over the next 2 days, he began a campaign of harassment that would prove just how dangerous his obsession had become. He sent Sarah multiple text messages, each one more desperate and inappropriate than the last. He drove by her house at odd hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. He even showed up at her workplace, claiming he needed to talk to her about something urgent, forcing Sarah to have security escort him from the building. It became clear that David's declaration of love was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather the tip of an iceberg that had been building beneath the surface for years. His behaviour escalated to the point where Sarah began to fear for her safety, and Michael knew they had no choice but to tell Emma everything that was happening. The conversation with Emma was one of the most difficult moments in Sarah's life. Sitting across from her sister in Emma's living room, Sarah had to find the words to explain that the man Emma trusted, the father of her children, the person she had built her life with, had been living a lie for years. Emma's reaction was a mixture of shock, denial, and devastating heartbreak. Emma's first instinct was to defend her husband, to insist that there must be some misunderstanding, that David would never betray her in such a way. But as Sarah recounted the details of their lunch meeting and showed Emma some of the inappropriate text messages David had sent, the truth became impossible to deny. Emma's world crumbled before their eyes as she realized that her marriage, her family, her entire life had been built on a foundation of deception. When David returned home that evening, Emma confronted him with what she had learned. Instead of showing remorse or apologizing for his behavior, David became defensive and accusatory. He blamed Sarah for leading him on, claimed that she had been flirting with him for years, and insisted that his feelings were justified because Sarah obviously felt the same way about him. This response only served to confirm Emma's worst fears about her husband's mental state. The man she had loved and trusted was not only capable of betraying their marriage, but was also so delusional that he couldn't even acknowledge the harm he had caused. Emma realized in that moment that her marriage was over and that she needed to protect herself and her children from David's increasingly unstable behavior. Emma asked David to leave the house that night, and she immediately contacted a family law attorney to begin divorce proceedings. She also filed a restraining order against David to prevent him from contacting Sarah, understanding that his obsession posed a real threat to her sister's safety and well-being. The legal proceedings revealed even more disturbing details about David's behavior. When Emma's attorney gained access to David's computer and phone records, they discovered years' worth of photos he had secretly taken of Sarah at family gatherings. Detailed journals where he had written fantasies about their imagined relationship, and evidence that he had been stalking her social media accounts using fake profiles. The extent of David's obsession was truly terrifying. He had been living a double life for years, playing the role of devoted husband and father while secretly nurturing an unhealthy fixation on his sister-in-law. The discovery of this evidence made it clear that David's feelings were not love, but rather a dangerous obsession that had consumed his ability to think rationally or behave appropriately. As the legal process unfolded, Sarah and Michael had to come to terms with the fact that someone they had trusted and welcomed into their lives had violated that trust in the most fundamental way possible. They struggled with feelings of guilt, wondering if they had missed warning signs or somehow enabled David's behavior by being too trusting and open with him. Emma faced an even more difficult journey as she navigated the end of her marriage while trying to protect her children from the emotional fallout. She had to explain to her 7-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter why Daddy was no longer living with them, without revealing the full extent of his inappropriate behavior. It was a delicate balance between honesty and age-appropriate information, requiring Emma to be both mother and protector in ways she had never imagined. The children, innocent victims in this adult drama, struggled to understand why their family was falling apart. They missed their father and couldn't comprehend why he couldn't come home. Emma worked with a family therapist to help the children process their emotions and adjust to their new reality, always keeping their emotional well-being as her top priority. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself dealing with her own trauma from the experience. She felt violated by David's unwanted attention and struggled with anxiety about potentially running into him in public. The sense of safety she had always felt as part of a loving family had been shattered, replaced by a hypervigilance that exhausted her emotionally and physically. Michael became Sarah's fierce protector, accompanying her to places where they might encounter David and ensuring that their home security was upgraded to help Sarah feel safe again. He also struggled with his own feelings of anger and betrayal, fighting the urge to confront David directly while understanding that the legal system was the appropriate way to handle the situation. The family's social circle was also affected by the revelation of David's behavior. Friends and extended family members had to choose sides, with some finding it difficult to believe that the charming, funny David they thought they knew was capable of such deception and harassment. The situation forced everyone to reevaluate their relationships and their understanding of the people they thought they knew well. As months passed, the legal proceedings moved forward, with David eventually agreeing to a divorce settlement that gave Emma full custody of the children and ownership of their family home. The restraining order against him was extended, and he was required to undergo psychological evaluation and counselling as a condition of having supervised visits with his children. Despite the legal resolution, the emotional healing process was far from over for everyone involved. Emma had to rebuild her life as a single mother, learning to navigate parenting, financial management, and her own emotional recovery simultaneously. She found strength she never knew she possessed, becoming an advocate for other women who had experienced similar betrayals and violations of trust. Sarah slowly began to feel safe again, though she remained more cautious about the boundaries she set with male friends and acquaintances. The experience had taught her that predatory behavior could hide behind the mask of family relationships and friendship, and she became more attuned to warning signs that she might have dismissed in the past. The extended family eventually found a new normal, one that didn't include David, but was stronger in its honesty and openness about the importance of healthy boundaries and mutual respect. Family gatherings became occasions for healing rather than pretense, with everyone more committed to authentic communication and emotional safety. Emma's children, with the help of ongoing therapy and their mother's unwavering love and support, began to thrive in their new family structure. They learned that families come in many different forms and that love and stability don't require the presence of someone who brings chaos and dishonesty into their lives. One of the most powerful lessons that emerged from this difficult experience was the importance of believing women when they report inappropriate behavior, even when it comes from seemingly trustworthy sources. Sarah's courage in telling her story, despite the potential for family drama and disbelief, ultimately protected not only herself but also Emma and the children from years of continued manipulation and deception. The story also highlighted the crucial role that healthy boundaries play in all relationships, even family relationships. David's violation of appropriate boundaries had been a gradual process, with small infractions that escalated over time into full-blown stalking and harassment. By learning to recognize and respond to boundary violations early, families can protect themselves from more serious harm down the road. Another important aspect of this story is the way that Sarah and Emma's relationship ultimately grew stronger through the crisis. Rather than allowing David's actions to drive a wedge between them, the sisters chose to support each other and work together to ensure everyone's safety and well-being. Their bond became a source of strength that helped both of them navigate the challenges of the legal process and emotional healing. The community response to Emma's situation also demonstrated the importance of having strong support systems in place when crisis strikes. Friends, neighbours, and extended family members rallied around Emma and her children, providing practical help with childcare, meals, and household maintenance, while also offering emotional support during the most difficult times. Professional help played a crucial role in everyone's healing process. The family therapist who worked with Emma's children provided them with age-appropriate ways to understand and cope with their family's changes. Sarah's individual counsellor helped her process her own trauma and develop strategies for feeling safe and secure again. Emma worked with both a therapist and a support group for divorced women to rebuild her confidence and plan for her future. The legal system, while sometimes slow and frustrating, ultimately provided the framework necessary to protect Sarah from continued harassment and to ensure that Emma could rebuild her life with security and stability. The restraining order gave Sarah peace of mind, while the custody arrangements protected the children from being used as pawns in their father's continued manipulation attempts. As time passed, David's attempts to contact Sarah continued sporadically, usually through new email addresses or social media accounts that he would create after his previous ones were blocked. Each attempt reinforced the wisdom of the restraining order and the importance of maintaining strict no-contact policies with individuals who demonstrate obsessive behavior. The experience taught everyone involved about the insidious nature of emotional manipulation and the way that predatory individuals often present themselves as caring, helpful family members while secretly harboring destructive intentions. David's behavior had been carefully calculated to maintain his access to Sarah while avoiding detection by Emma or other family members. During the months that followed David's initial confession, Sarah began working with a trauma counselor who specialized in helping women recover from stalking and harassment situations. These therapy sessions became a safe space where Sarah could process the complex emotions she was experiencing, not just fear and violation, but also guilt and self-doubt about whether she had somehow encouraged David's behavior without realizing it. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, Sarah's therapist, helped her understand that victims of obsessive behavior often experience these feelings of misplaced responsibility. One of the most damaging aspects of this kind of violation, Dr. Reynolds explained during one of their sessions, is the way it makes victims question their own perceptions and behavior. You did nothing wrong, Sarah. You were simply being a kind and welcoming family member, and David chose to misinterpret your natural warmth and openness. These therapy sessions revealed layers of trauma that Sarah hadn't initially recognized. She discovered that she had been unconsciously modifying her behavior at family gatherings for years, always making sure she wasn't alone with David, always positioning herself near other people when he was around, always feeling slightly on edge in his presence, without understanding why. Her subconscious mind had been trying to protect her from something her conscious mind hadn't yet recognized as a threat. Emma's healing journey was equally complex and multifaceted. Beyond the obvious heartbreak of discovering her husband's betrayal, she had to grapple with the realization that her entire marriage had been built on deception. Every romantic gesture from David, every "I love you," every intimate moment they had shared was now tainted by the knowledge that he had been thinking about another woman throughout their relationship. Working with her own therapist, Dr. Michael Chen, Emma slowly began to understand the full scope of what she had experienced. What David did to you was a form of emotional abuse, Dr. Chen explained. He used your love and trust as a cover for his obsession with your sister. This wasn't just adultery of the heart. This was systematic deception that violated your consent to be in this marriage. The revelation about David's true feelings forced Emma to reevaluate every aspect of their 12-year relationship. Had he married her because he genuinely loved her, or because it gave him access to Sarah? Were his expressions of love authentic, or were they performances designed to maintain his cover while he pursued his real obsession? These questions haunted Emma during the early months of their separation, creating a kind of psychological archaeology as she dug through years of memories trying to understand what had been real and what had been manipulation. The impact on Emma and David's children was a constant source of heartbreak for everyone involved. 10-year-old Sophie was old enough to sense that something serious was happening, but too young to understand the adult complexities involved. She knew Daddy didn't live with them anymore, and she could see that Mommy was sad much of the time. But the explanations she received were necessarily vague and age-appropriate. 8-year-old Tyler's response was different, but equally heartbreaking. He became clingy and anxious, afraid to leave his mother's side and constantly asking when Daddy was coming home. He began having nightmares and reverting to behaviors he had outgrown years earlier, like thumb-sucking and wanting to sleep in his mother's bed every night. Emma worked closely with Dr. Sarah Martinez, a child psychologist who specialized in helping children navigate family transitions and trauma. Dr. Martinez helped Emma find age-appropriate ways to explain the situation to her children without destroying their trust in adults or their sense of security in the world. Children Sophie and Tyler's age need consistency and honesty, but they also need protection from adult complexities that they're not equipped to handle, Dr. Martinez explained to Emma. We want to preserve their ability to trust and love while also helping them understand that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people, and when that happens, we have to make changes to keep everyone safe. The legal proceedings that followed David's harassment of Sarah and Emma's decision to file for divorce were lengthy and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. Emma's attorney, Rebecca Harrison, was a family law specialist who had handled similar cases involving stalking and obsessive behavior within family networks. Cases like this are unfortunately more common than people realize, Attorney Harrison explained to Emma during their first consultation. Family-based stalking often goes unreported because victims feel like they won't be believed or because they don't want to cause family drama. But what David has done is a serious violation that deserves legal consequences. The discovery process revealed disturbing evidence that painted a clear picture of David's obsessive behavior over the years. His computer contained thousands of photos of Sarah that he had collected from social media, family gatherings, and even some that appeared to have been taken without her knowledge at public events. There were detailed journals where he had recorded Sarah's daily routines, her work schedule, and even her favorite restaurants and shopping locations. Perhaps most disturbing were the elaborate fantasy scenarios that David had written about imaginary romantic encounters with Sarah. These documents revealed the depth of his delusion and the extent to which he had constructed an entire alternate reality in which Sarah returned his feelings and was simply waiting for the right moment to leave Michael and be with him. The legal team also discovered evidence that David had been creating fake social media profiles to monitor Sarah's activities online. He had been friending her friends and colleagues under false identities to gain access to photos and information about her daily life that she hadn't shared publicly. This digital stalking had been going on for at least 3 years, creating a comprehensive surveillance network that Sarah had been completely unaware of. When this evidence was presented to Emma, it was almost more devastating than the initial confession of David's feelings. The extent of his deception and the elaborate nature of his obsessive behavior made it clear that this was not simply a case of misplaced romantic feelings, but rather a serious psychological condition that posed a genuine threat to everyone involved. The custody evaluation process was particularly challenging for Emma as she tried to balance her desire to protect her children from their father's instability, while also preserving their relationship with him if it could be done safely. The court-appointed psychologist, Dr. James Foster, conducted extensive interviews with all family members and reviewed the evidence of David's obsessive behavior. Dr. Foster's final report recommended supervised visitation only, noting that David's demonstrated inability to respect boundaries and his construction of elaborate fantasy relationships raised serious concerns about his judgment and emotional stability. While Mr. Williams has not demonstrated any direct threat to his children, the report stated, his pattern of obsessive behavior and boundary violations suggests that he may not be capable of making appropriate decisions regarding their welfare without professional oversight. The financial aspects of the divorce were complicated by David's attempts to use money as a tool of manipulation and control. He initially refused to provide financial documentation, claiming that the divorce was unnecessary and that Emma was overreacting to what he characterized as a minor misunderstanding about his feelings for Sarah. When the court ordered full financial disclosure, it revealed that David had been slowly draining their joint savings accounts and redirecting money into accounts that Emma didn't have access to. He had also taken out a significant loan against their home's equity without Emma's knowledge, apparently planning to use the money to purchase expensive gifts for Sarah as part of his plan to win her affections. The discovery of these financial manipulations added another layer of betrayal to Emma's experience. Not only had David been emotionally unfaithful and deceptive about his true feelings, but he had also been stealing from their children's future to fund his obsessive pursuit of her sister. Throughout this legal process, Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being both a victim who needed protection and a witness whose testimony was crucial to ensuring Emma's safety and securing appropriate custody arrangements. Testifying about David's harassment and providing evidence of his unwanted communications was emotionally exhausting, but Sarah recognized its importance for protecting her sister and her niece and nephew. The restraining order hearing was particularly difficult for Sarah, as she had to recount David's inappropriate confessions and subsequent harassment in detail for the court record. David was present in the courtroom with his attorney, and Sarah could feel his eyes on her throughout her testimony, creating an additional layer of discomfort and anxiety. "I want the court to understand," Sarah testified, "that this was not a simple misunderstanding or a momentary lapse in judgment. David's behavior was persistent, escalating, and completely inappropriate. He showed no respect for my clearly stated boundaries, no concern for the harm he was causing to his own family, and no understanding of how his actions were affecting everyone involved." David's attorney attempted to minimize his behavior, characterizing it as an emotional crisis brought on by marital problems, and suggesting that a simple apology and counseling would be sufficient to resolve the situation. However, the extensive evidence of David's long-term obsessive behavior and his continued attempts to contact Sarah even after being told to stop made it clear that this was not a temporary emotional crisis, but rather a deeply ingrained pattern of inappropriate behavior. Judge Patricia Williams, who presided over both the restraining order hearing and the divorce proceedings, was clearly disturbed by the evidence presented in the case. This court has seen many family law cases involving infidelity and inappropriate relationships, she noted in her final ruling, but the systematic nature of Mr. McWilliams' deception and the elaborate fantasy life he constructed around his obsession with his sister-in-law represents a serious violation of trust that goes far beyond typical marital problems. The judge granted Emma's request for a divorce on grounds of emotional abuse and granted Sarah a 3-year restraining order that prohibited David from any form of contact with her, including through third parties or social media. The custody arrangement required David to complete psychological evaluation and ongoing counseling before being permitted unsupervised visitation with his children. As the legal proceedings concluded and the immediate crisis began to resolve, both Sarah and Emma faced the longer-term work of healing from the trauma they had experienced and rebuilding their lives and relationships. The extended family also had to navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges that came with removing David from their close-knit network while maintaining support for Emma and her children. Sarah's parents, Robert and Janet Williams, struggled with feelings of guilt and responsibility, wondering if they had somehow failed to protect their daughters by not recognizing David's inappropriate behavior sooner. They had always prided themselves on being good judges of character and on creating a family environment where everyone felt safe and welcomed. "How did we miss this?" Sarah's mother asked during one of many family conversations about the situation. "David was in our home countless times. He played with our grandchildren. He helped with holiday preparations. He seemed like such a devoted husband and father. How could we have been so wrong about who he really was, Doctor?" Reynolds helped Sarah understand that this kind of self-questioning was normal among family members who had been deceived by someone with David's manipulative skills. "People like David are often very good at presenting the image they want others to see," she explained. "They study social situations carefully and learn to mimic the behaviors and responses that will gain them access and trust. This isn't a failure on your family's part. This is evidence of how calculated and deliberate David's deception really was." Michael's response to the situation evolved over time, from protective anger to a deeper understanding of the complex trauma that his wife had experienced. Initially, his instinct was to confront David directly and physically remove him from their lives through force if necessary. But as he learned more about the psychology of stalking and obsessive behavior, he realized that his role as Sarah's husband was to provide steady, consistent support while she worked through her own healing process. "I wanted to fix this immediately," Michael confided to their couples counselor, Dr. Amanda Stone. I wanted to make Sarah feel safe again right away, and when I couldn't do that, I felt like I was failing as her husband. Learning to be patient with the healing process and to follow Sarah's lead about what she needed has been one of the hardest parts of this whole experience. The couple's counseling sessions helped Sarah and Michael strengthen their communication and develop strategies for navigating the ongoing challenges that came with David's continued presence in their lives through his connection to Emma's children. Even though David was no longer welcome at family gatherings, he would always be Sophie and Tyler's father, which meant that Sarah and Michael had to find ways to maintain their relationship with Emma and the children, while maintaining appropriate boundaries with David. Emma's journey toward independence was both inspiring and challenging to witness. Having been married since she was 19 years old, she had to learn how to navigate adult responsibilities like home maintenance, financial management, and major decision-making without a partner. But as she developed these skills, she also discovered strengths and capabilities that had been dormant during her marriage. I realized that I had been making myself smaller for years to accommodate David's need to be the dominant partner in our relationship, Emma reflected during one of her therapy sessions. I had convinced myself that I needed him to handle certain aspects of our life together, but the truth is that I'm much more capable than I gave myself credit for. Emma's return to school to pursue a master's degree in social work was a turning point in her healing process. The academic challenge provided a positive focus for her energy and intelligence, while the subject matter helped her process her own experience within the larger context of family trauma and recovery. Studying trauma-informed social work practice has helped me understand that what happened to me and Sarah wasn't unique, Emma explained to her family. There are patterns to this kind of behavior, and there are proven strategies for healing and prevention. I want to use what I've learned to help other families who are facing similar situations. The children's adaptation to their new family structure was gradual, but ultimately successful. Sophie, now 11, began expressing interest in her mother's studies and asking thoughtful questions about why some people make choices that hurt other people. Tyler, now 9, remained more focused on the practical aspects of their changed family life, but seemed to thrive with the increased stability and honesty that characterized their new normal. Both children benefited from ongoing family therapy sessions where they could express their feelings about their father's absence and their confusion about the adult conflicts they didn't fully understand, Dr. Martinez worked with them to develop healthy coping strategies and to maintain their sense of security while acknowledging that families sometimes face difficult challenges. The broader family's healing process involved creating new traditions and ways of connecting that honored everyone's need for safety while maintaining the close bonds that had always been important to them. Holiday gatherings became smaller but more intimate, with careful attention paid to creating environments where everyone could feel comfortable and secure. Sarah's relationship with her niece and nephew required special attention as they navigated the complex reality that Uncle David was no longer welcome in their lives, while Aunt Sarah remained a constant source of love and support. Sarah worked with Dr. Martinez to find age-appropriate ways to maintain her close relationship with Sophie and Tyler, while respecting the boundaries that protected her own emotional well-being. Looking back on the experience, Sarah often reflected on the importance of trusting her instincts. There had been moments over the years when David's behavior had made her slightly uncomfortable, but she had dismissed these feelings as overthinking or misinterpretation. Learning to honor these intuitive warning signs became an important part of her healing process and her ability to feel safe in the world again. These moments of discomfort, Sarah realized in retrospect, had been her subconscious mind's attempt to warn her about David's inappropriate attention. There was the time at Sophie's 8th birthday party when David had insisted on taking multiple photos of Sarah, claiming he wanted to capture her beautiful smile for Emma. There was the Christmas gathering when he had lingered too long during their goodbye hug, holding her just a fraction longer than felt appropriate for a brother-in-law. There were the text messages that came at odd hours, ostensibly about mundane family matters, but with an underlying tone that felt somehow too personal, too intimate for their relationship. At the time, Sarah had rationalized these incidents, telling herself she was reading too much into innocent behaviors. She had been raised to give people the benefit of the doubt, to assume positive intentions, and to avoid creating drama over minor social awkwardness. But the experience with David taught her that these instinctive feelings of discomfort often contain important information about boundary violations that our conscious minds might not immediately recognize. Dr. Reynolds helped Sarah understand that this process of learning to trust her instincts was not about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everyone around her, but rather about developing a more nuanced understanding of the difference between genuine kindness and manipulative behavior designed to gain access or advantage. Healthy relationships respect your comfort level, Dr. Reynolds explained during one of their sessions. When someone consistently pushes against your boundaries, even in small ways, it's often a sign that they don't have your best interests at heart. Learning to recognize and respond to these early warning signs can prevent more serious violations down the road. Emma's journey toward healing involved not only processing the betrayal by her husband, but also rebuilding her identity as an individual rather than as half of a married couple. This process of rediscovering herself was both liberating and frightening, as she had to confront aspects of her personality and desires that she had suppressed or ignored during her marriage. During her marriage to David, Emma had gradually become smaller, quieter, more accommodating. She had convinced herself that this was simply maturity and compromise, the natural evolution of a long-term partnership. But as she worked through her trauma in therapy, she began to recognize that many of these changes had been responses to subtle manipulation and control that she hadn't recognized at the time. I realize now that David needed me to be less confident, less independent, because it made it easier for him to pursue his obsession with Sarah, Emma reflected during one of her therapy sessions. Every time I expressed an opinion that contradicted his, every time I suggested activities or friendships that didn't center around his desires, he would find ways to discourage or undermine me. It was so gradual that I didn't even notice it happening. This recognition was both painful and empowering for Emma. Painful because it meant acknowledging that the last several years of her marriage had been built on deception and manipulation. Empowering because it meant that the confident, independent woman she had been before her marriage was still there, waiting to be reclaimed and strengthened. Emma's return to her authentic self was evident in ways both large and small. She started expressing opinions more forcefully in conversations, making decisions about her home and her children without seeking validation from others, and pursuing interests and friendships that brought her joy rather than simply fitting into someone else's vision of who she should be. One of the most significant aspects of Emma's healing was her decision to pursue a master's degree in social work with a specialization in family trauma. This choice represented not only her desire to help other families facing similar challenges, but also her commitment to transforming her painful experience into something that could benefit others. I never would have chosen to go through what David put our family through, Emma explained to her parents during one of their regular coffee dates. But since I have survived it, I want to make sure that other women don't have to face these situations alone or without resources. If my experience can help even one family recognize warning signs earlier or find healing faster, then something good will have come from all this pain. The children's resilience proved to be one of the most inspiring aspects of the entire situation. With proper support and honest, age-appropriate communication, they adapted to their new family structure and continued to thrive academically and socially. Their ability to bounce back demonstrated the incredible healing power of stable, loving relationships, even in the aftermath of trauma and loss. Sophie, now 12, had developed a maturity and emotional intelligence that seemed beyond her years. She became protective of her younger brother and supportive of her mother in ways that were touching but also concerning to the adults around her. Emma worked with Dr. Martinez, to ensure that Sophie didn't feel responsible for taking care of the family's emotional needs, while also honoring her natural empathy and desire to help. Sophie has always been sensitive to other people's emotions, Emma noted during one of their family therapy sessions. But I want to make sure that she doesn't feel like she has to be the family caretaker now that David is gone. She needs to be able to be a kid and focus on her own growth and happiness. Tyler's adaptation was more straightforward but no less remarkable. After the initial period of anxiety and regression, he seemed to thrive in the increased stability and consistency of their new family routine. Without the underlying tension that had characterized their home during the final months of Emma's marriage, Tyler became more confident, more playful, and more secure in his relationship with his mother. The broader family also learned valuable lessons about the importance of believing survivors of inappropriate behavior and taking swift action to protect vulnerable family members. The initial instinct to give David the benefit of the doubt or to minimize Sarah's concerns could have led to much more serious consequences if they had not ultimately chosen to prioritize safety over family harmony. Sarah's parents, in particular, struggled with guilt about their initial hesitation to fully believe the extent of David's inappropriate behavior. They had known David for more than 12 years, had welcomed him into their family, had trusted him with their grandchildren. The revelation of his true nature forced them to confront their own assumptions about their ability to judge character and their tendency to prioritize family peace over individual safety. "We raised our daughters to be kind and trusting," Sarah's father, Robert, reflected during one of the family conversations about the situation. "Those are still values that we believe in, but we've learned that kindness doesn't mean ignoring warning signs, and trust has to be earned and maintained through consistent, appropriate behavior." This lesson extended beyond their immediate family to their broader social circle as well. Friends and extended family members who had initially struggled to believe that the charming, helpful David could be capable of such deception and harassment gradually came to understand the complex nature of manipulative behavior and the importance of supporting survivors even when their accusations seem inconsistent with their own perceptions of the accused. Community awareness about the signs of obsessive behavior increased significantly as word of David's actions spread through social networks and support groups. Other women came forward with their own stories of inappropriate behavior from trusted family members or friends, creating opportunities for healing and prevention that might not have existed otherwise. Sarah began speaking at local support groups and community organizations about her experience, helping other women recognize the warning signs of family-based stalking and harassment. These speaking engagements were emotionally challenging but also deeply fulfilling as she watched other women gain confidence in their ability to protect themselves and their families. "One of the most difficult aspects of what I went through," Sarah would tell these groups, "was feeling like I was the only person who had ever experienced this kind of betrayal from someone they trusted. Learning that my experience was part of a larger pattern of behavior that affects many families was both disturbing and comforting. Disturbing because it meant this problem was more widespread than I had realized, but comforting because it meant I wasn't alone, and there were proven strategies for healing and prevention." The legal precedent set by Emma's successful restraining order and custody case provided a roadmap for other women facing similar situations. Her attorney, Rebecca Harrison, reported using the case as an example in subsequent family law situations where emotional abuse and stalking were factors in custody and divorce proceedings. These victims often struggle with self-doubt and guilt in ways that require specialized treatment approaches that honor the complexity of their relationships with the perpetrator. The ripple effects of David's actions continued to influence the family's life in both challenging and unexpected ways. Emma's professional success in her social work program led to job opportunities that allowed her to help other families while providing financial security for herself and her children. Sarah's advocacy work created new friendships and professional connections that enriched her life in ways she never could have anticipated. Even Michael found that the experience, while traumatic, ultimately strengthened his marriage and deepened his understanding of the importance of emotional safety in relationships. He became more attentive to Sarah's comfort level in social situations, more protective of their family's boundaries, and more committed to creating a home environment where open communication about difficult topics was not just welcome, but encouraged. As we reach the end of this story, it's important to remember that healing from betrayal and violation of trust is not a linear process. There are good days and difficult days, moments of strength and periods of vulnerability. But what this family's journey demonstrates is that with proper support, professional help, and a commitment to honest communication, it is possible to not only survive such experiences, but to emerge stronger and more resilient than before. Sarah today is a confident, empowered woman who has learned to trust her instincts and set firm boundaries in all her relationships. Her marriage to Michael has grown stronger through their shared commitment to protecting their family and supporting each other through crisis. They have become advocates for other families facing similar situations, sharing their story to help others recognize warning signs and seek help when needed. Emma has built a thriving life as a single mother, returning to school to pursue a career in social work where she can help other women navigate family crisis and rebuild their lives. Her children are happy, healthy, and secure in the love and stability she provides for them. She has even begun dating again, approaching new relationships with wisdom gained from her difficult experience, but without allowing past betrayal to close her heart to future love. The extended family has developed new traditions and ways of connecting that honor everyone's need for safety while maintaining the close bonds that have always been important to them. Holiday gatherings are smaller but more authentic. Work relationships are deeper but more honest, and everyone feels more confident in their ability to protect themselves and each other from harm. This story reminds us that families are not immune to the darker aspects of human nature, but it also demonstrates the incredible power of love, courage, and community support to overcome even the most devastating betrayals. When we choose to believe survivors, support those in crisis, and take swift action to protect the vulnerable, we create the possibility for healing and transformation that can inspire others facing similar challenges. The most important message to take from this experience is that you are not alone if you are facing inappropriate behavior from someone you trusted. There are resources available, people who will believe you, and legal protections that can help you reclaim your safety and peace of mind. Your feelings matter, your boundaries deserve respect, and you have the right to live free from harassment and manipulation, even from family members. If this story resonates with you, if you see similarities to your own experience, or if you know someone who might benefit from hearing about Sarah and Emma's journey, please know that help is available. Trust your instincts, speak up about inappropriate behavior, and don't be afraid to seek professional support as you navigate your own path toward healing and empowerment. Thank you for joining me for this story of resilience, courage, and the ultimate triumph of truth over deception. Remember that your safety and well-being matter, that healthy families are built on respect and honesty, and that you deserve relationships that honor your boundaries and celebrate your worth. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.